Now, Lyme disease sickens about 300,000 Americans each year, according to the CDC estimates, making it more common in this country than West Nile virus or any other illness transmitted by insects or arachnids. The black-legged tick picks up the disease-causing bacteria, Borrelia burgdorferi, by biting infected animals, and can then transmit Lyme disease to people in a subsequent bite. The disease causes fever, headache, fatigue, and sometimes a rash. And if it's not treated promptly, it can have more serious problems as damage to the heart, joints, and the central nervous system. Joining me now to look at the differences in geographical distribution of Lyme disease and a new study in the journal PLOS One is Howard Ginsberg, PhD. Dr. Ginsberg is with the United States Geological Survey and a professor with the Department of Plant Sciences and Entomology at the University of Rhode Island. Hello, Dr. Ginsberg, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, in your study, you look at why Lyme disease is so much more prevalent in the northern U.S. compared to the south. Specifically, you look at the factors that affect survival in the immature Xodes scapularis tick, with specific attention to the possible role of potential mortality factors that might differ under northern and southern conditions. Can you talk about what you and your colleagues did to determine the differences between ticks under different temperature and humidity conditions?
Sure. First, I should back up a little bit and point out that this is part of a much broader study with a lot of institutions involved, trying to answer that basic question, why Lyme disease is common in the north, but relatively rare in the south, even though the same tick species exists in both regions. Mm-hmm. And so this study that we just published, it really started from some results that Dr. Isis Arsenault of Michigan State University had found, where she looked at the behavior of ticks when they were seeking hosts from northern and southern populations. And she found a striking difference. That in northern populations of ticks climb onto the surface of the leaves and onto twigs when they're looking for hosts. In southern populations, the ticks stayed below the surface of the leaf litter. So that means, if you walk through the woods in the north, you get the ticks on your feet and then they climb up and bite, whereas in the south, you're stepping on top of the habitat, so you're much less likely to encounter the ticks. Sure. So this study was an attempt to try to figure out why that occurs, why that difference in behavior. And it arose from some previous studies where we had taken ticks from different populations, from Wisconsin, Massachusetts, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Michigan, and we put them in the environmental chambers in the lab under northern and southern conditions. And we thought, our hypothesis was that the ticks from northern sites would do better under northern conditions, but the ticks from southern sites would do better under southern conditions. That's not what we found. Mm-hmm. The ticks always live longer under northern conditions, which was kind of a surprise. Well, then, of course, so maybe the southern conditions were less congenial for tick survival or something. But then it occurred to us these ticks are ectothermic. They don't control their body temperatures. Oh. Human body temperature stays around 98.6, but ticks' body temperature depends on the environmental temperature. So maybe the warmer southern conditions just means the physiology goes faster, they live faster and die younger, and it's not really any mortality factor. So we designed this experiment to try to clarify that, doing clean experiments with just ticks of one genetic type. And we did that in a few different ways, but in one particular experiment, we used just ticks from Rhode Island, so they're the same location, and we set them in environmental chambers that were set for northern and southern conditions temperature, and we set them up at different humidity levels, 95% humidity, 85% humidity, and 75% humidity. And the reason we selected those humidity levels is that these ticks, they survive in very humid environments. They live in leaf litter, which is humid both north and south. But if they get below about 82 to 85%, the threshold is in that range. If they get below that threshold, they start to lose water. And if they stay below that threshold for 8 hours or more, then there's an effect on survival. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to look at how ticks survived under northern and southern conditions at these different humidities. So that's how we set the experiment up.
Okay, so what were your findings?
Well, we found that at 95% humidity, the ticks all survived, virtually. They all did fine. At 85% humidity, there was some mortality, and was a lot of variability in survival, but it was not clearly different among northern and southern conditions. However, at 75% humidity, they died quickly, and they always died more quickly under southern conditions.
So, so based on what your findings, what did you and your colleagues conclude?
Well, the implication of that is that when ticks live under southern conditions, if they come to the leaf litter surface and encounter those lower humidities, then there's a mortality effect. There's a desiccation stress that's put on the ticks, and so that led to a kind of logical hypothesis that comes from that is that the reason the ticks in southern environments stay below the leaf litter surface is that they've kind of evolved to avoid the desiccation stress if they came to the surface to seek hosts. Now, I mean, it's a logical hypothesis that follows from those experiments. It doesn't prove it, though. I mean, it's still a hypothesis at this point. So the next stage is to look at other reasons why ticks might differ in host-seeking behavior north to south. And one of the obvious differences in hosts. I mean, the ticks, one type of organism that ticks love to feed on in the south are the skinks, broad-headed skinks and five-line skinks, very common in the south. You get them in a few northern sites, but they're very rare up there. And up north, the ticks are primarily on rodents like mice and voles. Right. In the south, on live. So perhaps there's some type of difference because of they're seeking different hosts. The one study that's been done on that did not show a preference, but we are actually planning on collaborating with Russell Burke, a herpetologist at Hofstra University, to try to do those experiments this summer.
So would it be safe to say that if a climate in some areas changes and becomes a little bit warmer and drier, that the Lyme disease burden in that area might drop?
Well, it's certainly true that if you have dry environments, these ticks don't do well at all. And yeah, the Lyme disease would be less common if environments got drier. Of course, people normally don't think of the north as being moist and south as being dry. In fact, it's very humid in the south. But remember, these ticks require very high humidity. I mean, 75 to 80% humidity, that's humid for a human, but that's lethally dry for an immature stage of the black-legged tick. Yeah.
And last question, are your findings applicable to other tick species?
There might be some other tick species that it would apply to. It would not apply to the other common tick species we have in the eastern United States. I mean, you have the Lone Star tick and American dog tick. They do a lot better in dry conditions than the black-legged tick does. In fact, we actually did some experiments up in New York where we put black-legged ticks and Lone Star ticks out in little bags in the environment. And in the woods, they both survive pretty well, but in open habitats where it was drier, the Lone Star ticks survived well, but the black-legged ticks did not. So I don't think it applies as well to these other species.
Very good. Well, it was a very interesting study, and I will post that on the website when the podcast is available. Thank you, Dr. Howard Ginsberg, for your time and expertise, sir. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, sir. Okay. And